Lenskart's employee grooming policy. That the policy restricted employees from wearing certain religious markers, particularly the bindi and tilak, sparking outrage and calls for a boycott. The founders, Piyush Bansal, Neha Bansal, Amit Chaudhary, Sumit Kapahi, together hold barely around 20% of the company. The math is simple. A customer buys one pair of glasses and investors bring in hundreds of millions. The voice that carries more weight is obvious. Namaskar friends, myself Deepak Kumar Rath. I welcome you all to the digital media of Uday India. In India Things today, I want to speak about the recently controversy erupted when a document alleged to be Lenskart's employee grooming policy that went viral on social media. Netizens pointed out that the policy restricted employees from wearing certain religious markers, particularly the bindi and tilak, sparking outrage and calls for a boycott. And I want to tell you that what is the real reason behind this employee grooming policy. Friends, Lenskart cannot respect your bindi not because it hates you, but because it cannot afford to. That is the uncomfortable truth at the heart of India's startup story, a story where capital dictates culture and identity becomes negotiable. The company led by Piyush Bansal proudly claims to be built in Bharat for Indians. It is a line that sounds powerful, even patriotic, but beneath that branding lies a structure that tells a very different story. Lenskart's manufacturing presence in India is relatively recent, with its domestic facility opening only in 2023. Before that, the backbone of its production ran through China, and even today, critical elements of its supply chain, frames, raw materials and components remain deeply tied to Chinese ecosystems. What happens in India is largely assembly, not origin. But the real shift is not manufacturing, it is in ownership. The founders, Piyush Bansal, Neha Bansal, Amit Chaudhary, Sumit Kapahi, together hold barely around 20% of the company. The rest is controlled by global financial giants, SoftBank, Temasek, Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, KKR and Fidelity Investments. These are not passive investors. They come with expectations, frameworks and conditions that shape how companies behave long before a product reaches the customers. At the center of this influence sits ESG, a global compliance system that determines who receives capital and who doesn't. On paper, ESG is about sustainability and governance. In practice, it carries within it another layer. Diversity, equity, and inclusion stands shaped in Western societies. These standards were built around Western histories, Western conflicts, and Western social priorities. They were never designed for India's civilizational content. Basically, this system was designed around and was designed in America, built in America, American horrors, black minorities, gender wars, LGBTQ rights. Then how will they respect our culture? And that is where the friction begins. In this framework, vision identity markers like tilak, kalava, etc. are often interpreted through the lens of minority protection versus majority dominance. The majority by default is seen as a secure, even privileged. The implication is subtle but powerful. Symbols associated with the majority do not require institutional safeguarding. Over time, This logic shifts into corporate policies, especially in areas like workplace grooming and representation. That is why tilak, kalawa, bindi are considered risks, but hijab is not. So, when a company drafts its internal rules, it is not merely thinking about its Indian customers, it is thinking about compliance reports, investor expectations, and global perception. Because Lenskart is not just selling glasses, it is changing scale. It is moving towards a multiple billion-dollar public listing. And in that journey, its primary accountability shifts from everyday Indian buyer to the institutional investor writing $100 million checks. The math is simple. A customer buys one pair of glasses and investors bring in hundreds of millions. The voice that carries more weight is obvious. This dynamic is not unique. Companies like Swiggy, Zomato, Ola, Meso, and Zepto operate within the same ecosystem. Their capital structures reveal same pattern: significant foreign ownership, global compliance pressures, and gradual alignment with international value systems. Even the regulatory framework reflects this priority. Institutions like Securities and Exchange Board of India focuses on financial disclosures, investor protection, and market efficiency. Cultural questions really enter that domain unless they intersect directly with the law. The state too is invested in successful IPOs, rising valuations, and economic headlines. Identity, unless politically mobilized, remains outside the balance sheet. This is why the debate around Lenskart is not about one's company's policy, it is about architecture of India's startup company. When ownership shifts outward, influence follows. When influence follows, priorities change. And when priorities change, culture is no longer a given, it becomes a variable. Built in Bharat then becomes a tagline for Indians, becomes a campaign. The real document of truth lies elsewhere in cap tables, compliance reports, and investor presentations. And in that document, culture doesn't always find space. That's all for today. Stay tuned with India and subscribe to India. Thank you.